Okay, so Oliver, we'll start with your question, which was related to working with the chakra metaphor.
Okay, so my question for Tom is the following. For this question, I would like to work with the chakra metaphor. To what extent is it reasonable to use our mind to alter our own chakras? For example, to open our heart chakra when we find it closed, or to close other chakras which we don't want to be open. Do our chakras attune themselves properly by themselves, or do we have to keep them in check and monitor them regularly once we become aware of them?
Your question is based on an assumption that there are such things as chakras, and I'll start there. And chakras are a tool, okay? And you can use a tool or not use the tool, and it really doesn't, it isn't necessary for you to use a tool. So if you have an idea of what the tool does, okay, if you work on the chakra, let's say in the middle of your forehead, that will give you some sort of a better understanding and enlightenment, and that's a kind of a spiritual center. Also the one above your head, or you work, say, at the root chakra, and that'll have to do with your basic instincts and drives and so on. So if you are having issues with your instincts and drives, then you might want to work on the root chakra. All this is a tool set that allows people to focus their intent on what they would like to change, or where they would like to go, or what they want to do. So you could make up your own thing rather than chakras, and it would work just as well. But you'd have to have an understanding of what each one did. But the chakra system is a tool set, and whether you use it or not depends on you, whether that tool works for you. If you think breaking the various functions up into 7 categories, each category having certain attributes and functions that it does, and then you focus on that particular function, and whether you line 7 balls up, across, a shelf, and assign each ball, that function and that set of capabilities or whatever as the chakras, and then instead of worrying about chakras, you could just think about that ball. The ball at one end was the root center, and the ball at the other end represented your higher spiritual self. It would work just the same. So the chakras are kind of irrelevant. It's a way to help you focus your mind. They don't go on and do things without you, just like the balls wouldn't go on and do things without you. The only active ingredient here is your intent. And if you find the chakra system a useful tool set, then you can use those to focus your intent on becoming the way you would like to become. What you're focusing on is I would like to get my basic urges and drives kind of more out of the way. So you focus on that root chakra to see if you can't maybe tame it a little bit and make it not quite so aggressive. That's just it's just a tool set. So Oliver, no, when you're not paying attention, your chakras don't need attention or whatever. It's your paying attention is what does the trick. If you're not paying attention, then it's not that these things, well, I guess they do. They just go on as they are, but it's not like they're causing mischief when you're not keeping them in order. Except as a metaphor. Now, metaphorically, that's true. Metaphorically, those things are maybe, lolling around in their fears and reacting to fear and belief because you're not paying any attention to them, and that's just the way they are. So as a metaphor, yes, all that works out, and you should pay attention to all of your various, spiritual and bodily functions so that you as a whole person can grow and evolve. Whether you choose the chakras metaphor to do that or not really isn't important. It's that you do it. So if you want to grow spiritually, and that means spending time, or let's say you want to relate more to people, want to have more empathy, so you work on your heart chakra. I'm not even sure that's the right association. I don't know a whole lot about chakras. I've read about them, but I've forgotten most of it since I don't use that tool set. But anyway, let's say that I'm right there and that the empathy would have something to do with the heart chakra. Well, focusing on increasing your connection with people and becoming more empathetic will move you in that direction. That biases your probabilities in that direction because you have an intent to move that way. And that's very effective. Whether you do that in the form of chakra tools or not is really not relevant. So I don't know if that answers your question or not. It kind of reforms it maybe into a different question.
Yeah, sure. You answered it very well. That was the part that I wanted to understand a bit better. The next question then is from Greg. Greg, go
Oliver.
ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, Oliver, if I may, this is Buddy. I've had one sub-question, if I may, to the first one with chakras. My question basically was aimed, I understand that chakras is a metaphor, is a tool, and whether you, Tom, can tell us your opinion about working with a tool on a too intellectual basis. Basically, I know some people who have created a model for themselves and they take it, they delve too much into the details. I compare it to being a captain of my own ship, and I'm the leader. I just have to say where the ship should go and focus on the direction. Whereas the opposite way would be to focus too much on the details, like how the engine room is working and how the things are working in the kitchen, so to speak. And I wanted to ask whether this can be some opportunity, in your opinion, Tom, or whether there is a bigger risk in general to lose oneself in the details and get sidetracked by not important things.
Okay, it's the answer is all of the above. It depends on you as an individual. Okay, if you approach something with your intellect, and most of us do that, we want to do something, so we use our intellect. But that can be a trap. You can trap yourself into intellect. So all you ever accomplish is thinking about it, but never actually changing, because you're not really committed at the being level to make a change. You don't have a being level intent to do something. You have an intellectual intent to do something. So intent can be at both the intellectual level and the being level. As long as it's at the intellectual level, it doesn't carry much power. It's sort of like wishing. Okay, you can wish for things. You can throw a penny in the well and then wish for something. But that doesn't really have much impact. That's the intellectual intent. It's at the wish level. Now it may have some impact. You may some value there, but it's pretty small. There's a difference between making a wish and actually putting a lot of your being level energy into going somewhere, doing something, making something happen. So that's the difference. Yes, people get caught in their intellect, kind of spinning their wheels, so to speak, with their intellect, because that's all they know is intellect. They don't know how to do anything other than make a wish, because that's how their whole life is. Their whole life is their intellect making lots of wishes and kind of running the rest of their life, and they're not familiar with who they are at the being level. They're not familiar with the deeper aspect of themselves. So when you say, use your intent to, whatever, right, to get rid of your fears, then they kind of wish that their fears would go away, because that's the level at which they operate in life. So anyway, you have to connect your intent at the being level. And for many people, that's a hard thing. They say, well, how do I do that? And again, it's this difference between acting and being. We can act nice, but that's different than being nice. You see, if we do things because our intellect says it's a good thing to do, therefore we should do these things, and we do them, that's not the same as if you are a good person and you do those good things just because that's the way you are. You see, there's a different level of authenticity. So the being level is where you have to work from. Now, at the being level, you also have an intellectual component. You also have intent. You can think, if you will, at the being level. Now this gets really confusing, right? Well, how do I tell when I'm thinking at the being level from when I'm thinking, at the intellectual level? Well, the difference is that if you're thinking, if your mind is functioning in service to your fear, or let's say in service to your ego or in service to your beliefs, okay, then it's not effective. That's what we're talking about, the intellectual. That's where most of us are with our intellects most of the time. We say and do and feel the things, and our intellect works in that process where we're dealing with our ego and our fears. And that's what I mean by the intellectual level that's not really effective in changing you at the being level. But you can have cognitive awareness at the being level as well. And that's you thinking, not being motivated or not being driven by your fears or your ego. That's you at the being level. So this is a very confusing point, and it's a kind of a good one for you to bring up. And a lot of people struggle with this idea. Is it, well, if the intellect level isn't good and I shut off my intellect, there's nothing left. Who am I then? Now I'm just the point of consciousness floating in the void that has no thoughts. Okay, what can I do with that? You see, so there's this trap, and that's because they don't see themselves as existing other than as this intellectual actor who goes out and does things that they think they should be doing. Well, it's a slow process of becoming aware of yourself at the being level. Who am I? Who am I, the authentic person? That's why many of the people who write books about self-help and get in touch, they say what you need to do is live in the moment, be in the now, just be you and be aware. Well, what they're trying to do when they tell you that is just let your intellect go away and meet yourself. Just be you. Be aware of who you are and what you're doing, and do that at a very basic, authentic level, as opposed to acting, doing what you think you should be doing, thinking what you think you should be doing. And why do you think you should be doing anything in particular? Well, that's because there's an ego. And that ego, doesn't want to be doing the wrong thing. It's afraid of failure and other things, so it's doing what it should be. And it's a very hard lesson to learn. It's one of these things you just get with time. So yes, the answer is all of the above. You can trap yourself in an intellectual, chasing your own tail, I guess, intellectually, and think you're doing something, and then you get very disappointed that nothing happens. Well, I've been doing this, you see, and I'm not making any progress. My guides won't talk to me. That's because your guides don't want to interact with you on an intellectual level. They want to interact with you on a being level, and at your being level, you're not aware. You're not communicative at the being level. You're only communicative at the intellectual level. So they will work with signs or with intuition or other such things without getting into an intellectual exchange with you. So that's kind of the first place to go, and we try to do that with our meditation. And that's when we let all the thoughts go in our meditation. We want to connect with our authentic self. That's kind of the key thing in meditation, is to get rid of all the chatter. And if you get rid of all the chatter, often the intellect kind of goes away with the chatter because your intellect is chatting. And there you're left with you. And then get to know that person, that inner self, who you are as an individuated unit of consciousness, not who you are as an image or you know, a this or a that, you know, a worker, you know, an engineer, a father, you know, all those things that are part of your intellect. You define yourself as the role. You're more than the role. Yes, you are the role, but besides that, there's a person inside, you know, and that person exists and functions at a being level as well as the intellectual level, you know, in their various roles of what they should do and how they should be doing it. So it's a trap. You don't have to do that. You don't have to use the intellect very much. Once you've identified that authentic person in the middle, you can just work through that. Let the intellect go. Until you've identified that authentic person that's inside and can think from that level as opposed to the intellectual level, then you need the intellect. You need that intellect in order to direct yourself to finding a more authentic person inside. So for the person who's an intellectual, particularly the left-brained person, they need to use their intellect just to decide that, well, this meditation might be good for me. I maybe need to do this. Perhaps I need to grow myself spiritually. Now that's their intellect talking, and they're thinking that because they think maybe they ought to do that. Not so much that they, from a deep being level, you know, are making these decisions. It's from the intellect, but that's how you have to start. And after that, and while you're meditating, you get to know yourself. You get to see a difference between you, the authentic being at the core, and you, the image that goes out and, you know, meets and greets people and goes to work. And then eventually those two merge and you become that authentic person. Even when you're out meeting and greeting and being all those roles, you be that from the authentic person who you are. And the intellect as a server of the ego and fear kind of disappears and you become that authentic individual. And at that point, yes, you can still think. Yes, you can still, you know, do analysis, but you're doing it from the being level. It's just you interacting the way you are, not the way you're interacting, I guess, not acting. It's who you really are. That's a difficult journey to take, and that should be one of our main goals, is to develop this sense of being level, who we are, and being able to work from that place. Okay, when you can work from that place, then your need for tools becomes less and less and less. The tools tend to trick the intellect into focusing you. So you need, most people need both. They need to work at both ends because our culture kind of forces us to be left-brained in a lot of ways. It's just the way our culture is. Right-brained people don't have this issue. Right-brained people are generally very much authentic all the time. They just are who they are. And for that reason, they get labeled as, space cadets and airheads and that sort of thing, because they're very much in touch with their inner self, but they're not really all that good at acting and playing the role correctly out in the larger world. So they're seen as being a little out of it. That's because they're interacting at a different level. But when you know people who are very right-brained and you sit down and talk with them, you realize you're talking to a very genuine person. Even if they seem kind of flighty and you can't follow what they're doing and they can't really explain logically, what they're thinking about, they're very genuine. That's because they're operating. This is typically, there are right-brained people who, would maybe not be this way, and left-brained people aren't that way. I'm just talking about the big bunch of us in the middle. But anyway, the right-brained people tend to not have this issue as much as we left-brainers. But we left-brainers make up the dominant part of our culture. The right-brainers are just a very few in the margins. They're not nearly so plentiful as we left-brainers. That's why this is such a big problem. So yes, it can be a problem, but it doesn't have to be. You can use tools right from the being level, because that helps you focus your intent, but you're not nearly so dependent on them.
I'm sorry to hijack this. I know there are a lot of questions, but one very pertinent thing came up when you mentioned, um, acting out of, being the being level, me. I went about, I don't know, 4 or 5 months without sugar, as you recommend, and I tested whether this has any effect. But in my travels, business-related travels, I often have seen that I'm drawn to sweets, even though I could have lived without them. I knew it's not a problem for me. I still saw that something is drawing me there. So, and I knew that it's not going to do any good. I knew that I can live without it. I was certain because I went for many months. But still, what is the right way to act in that moment? I know that maybe something physical in me, some beliefs or something like that, may be attracting me to that thing that I perceive as bad or not very good, not healthy, not beneficial. But I decided to just trying to go with that for a while, hoping that the negative feedback that I was expecting, I was actually believing that negative feedback will come. So that's also not a very healthy attitude. But anyway, I hope that I will learn in this way to overcome that thing that always wanted to have those sweets in the breakfast buffet. And I want to ask, was this acting out of my true self, so to speak, or was it giving power to the intellect and ego, which with some program in me wanted to satisfy some emotional need, maybe with sweets?
The answer to that is neither. You probably have that draw to the sweets because you have a physical addiction to it, and that's just rule set. It's just the way the rule set works. You know, our virtual bodies can get to where, you know, they have very complex processes going on, right? That's our biology, and this is all just part of the rule set, the way that things work. Well, those complex biological processes can get in a loop to where they need. You know, we call that an addiction. When we want something just because we're addicted to it, and that's probably why you're drawn towards sweets. It's like addiction to anything else, and your addiction just draws you in that direction. And you could let it go, but you decide, well, you know, this time I'll just do it and see what happens. And what happens is you get a hit of that dope, and now you feel better, and everything's okay. And then you slowly kind of fog up again, and you know, so it's just an addiction. Like any addiction, you just have to learn to say no, you know, and let it go. Eventually, that need to reach out for that sweet stuff will just disappear, and in place of it, you'll have kind of an opposite reaction. You'll see that sweet stuff, and you'll kind of go, you know, let me get away from that. Because you know that if you take it, you'll feel bad. At least that's the way I am. I know that if I take any of that stuff, you know, now I'm going to have you know, a headache, sore gums, fuzzy mind, you know, all those things, and I don't want to go there. So that makes sweets very unattractive to me. It'd be like you know, you might not like eating you know, say drinking straight vinegar. You know, you wouldn't do that. Somebody says, oh, have a glass of vinegar, and you'd say, oh, no thanks, I really don't want to go there. Why? Because it just would taste horrible, and that's why. And that's kind of the way I, you know, react to things that are sweet. You know, it's a similar kind of thing. But I think it's just a physical addiction. It's just a rule set is pushing you that way because you've done it. Your body's gotten addicted to it, and now you crave it. You want it. And that craving comes out in oh, it won't hurt. Just take one. It'll be all right. You know, one won't hurt you. You know, it's like the alcoholic who says, well, I just take one drink. You know, just one drink. It'll be all right. And then of course there's always one more and one more after that, and that's the way addiction goes.
Tom, can I add to that?
Sure.
Yep. Well, not really adding to that, but would you say the same thing would apply to food? For example, non-vegetarian food. So, you know, after our last session at Spokane, I really had this strong desire to turn vegetarian, and I did so for a few months. And I'm still not eating any chicken or meat, but I've gone back to eating fish. Now, I haven't had any cravings to have meat, but I just wasn't feeling physically very good. And ever since I went back to eating fish, I've been feeling healthier. So again, would you say that since I don't have any cravings, so it's not really that, yeah, as you were pointing out in Bali's case, that the sweet was an addiction, right? So it's not really an addiction, but you think if I waited for longer, I would again start feeling healthier without having to resort to any kind of meat, including fish?
Well, I would say that it's probably a belief. You probably have a belief somewhere in your mind that if you don't eat any meat, then it's going to affect your health negatively. And that belief, well, okay, I can be a vegetarian, but, am I going to get enough protein? Am I going to feel strong? Am I going to have energy? I don't know. Vegetables, you're going to get energy with carrots and celery. It doesn't seem like that's going to work. You need meat because you've listened to that propaganda probably all your life about, eat meat, more protein, healthy, big muscles, strong. If you don't eat meat, you'll be a weakling and so on. You get that out of your culture. Mm-hmm. And it's just all around everywhere because the marketers have been trying to sell that concept. So we have that, even though it's maybe not at our intellectual level. That's just part of the beliefs that's kind of soak in out of our culture. And my guess is that that's your problem, is that belief. Now, on the other hand, everybody's different, and how your body deals with food and metabolizes it and how long it'll take it to change to do something else, well, that's just you. And it may be you need to do that for a while to give your body a chance to, make the transition a little, again, it's a rule set stuff. The rule set has us working these physical bodies, and they have to abide by all these rules called biology, and everybody's a little different there. So, I'm not saying like, oh, it's all in your mind, forget about it, whatever. You may, it may be something that your body requires because your body's used to it, and it may take a while for you to wean yourself off of that, and it may be exactly as you see it. You may not feel as good or as energetic because your body isn't really processing in a way that it's getting everything it needs from the vegetarian food. Or it may be that you just have this belief and you are going to experience what you believe. So it could be both, could be either one. But, it's not like a problem that's black and white. It's not like if you're not doing it right, you're doing it wrong. There's lots of paths that'll take you to the right place. One path may be cold turkey, become a vegetarian, or maybe even vegan. Another path may be work toward that over a year or two. See how it feels. Move a little bit slower with it. That's another path. You'll still get there. Whether you get there a year later or 2 years later isn't really that important. You got a long view. We're looking at where we're going to end up. 30, 40, 50 years from now, that's what we're talking about, what you're going to learn. And it's not like you got to learn it fast. You just need to learn it. And sometimes trying to learn it fast turns out to be slower than just taking your time and dealing with it as it comes. So it's better not to be too black and white about if I'm not doing it right, I'm doing it wrong. It's just that do it the way it comes to you. If you have an intent that you are going to move toward a healthier, better place, then you will eventually get to that place. If that's a real intent of yours, if that's something at your being level that you want, you'll end up there. And you kind of have to do it in your own way, on your own path. And if somebody else says, that eating that fish is going to, cause you a problem, and it doesn't, it seems to actually help you along, well then do it, you see, with the idea that there's always change. You're always working on yourself to do better, but you don't have to take a great, step, a great giant leap forward You can just get there as you're ready. You force yourself to do things you're not ready for, you end up usually with issues and problems. So you kind of have to go at your own pace.
Good, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, are we ready for the next question?
Yeah, sure. If you
Yes.
want to go ahead and ask
All right.
Greg, that'd be.
So my question was about meditation and concentration. Many traditions or schools of meditation make a distinction between meditation and concentration as separate practices, while some do not. I seek to both quiet my mind of chatter and to learn to enhance awareness and focus, but I'm not sure if I should be working on them separately or simultaneously. Can you tell us your thoughts on the difference, if any, between meditation and concentration? The technique given in the book seems to be more meditation-based. Do you agree with that? And if so, how would you recommend exercising concentration?
Okay, they are two different things. It is not all the same thing. I would say that the idea that goes with meditation is to let go of the noise. But the end point of that, when you have let go of all the noise, you've let go of your attachment and connection to the physical reality, then you're in a state I call point consciousness. You're just alone in the void. You exist just as a point of consciousness, but you're thinking nothing. You just exist, that's all. You're only aware of your existence, and there are no thoughts, okay, without thought. Now that's point consciousness, and that's a good place to go, and that's kind of the end point of meditation, to get to that spot. But that doesn't really get you, it gets you to the doorway, but it doesn't let you, walk through it or do much. After you get to that point, and you can hold that point for a while, now you have to be able to function. You need to be able to direct, and you do that with your intent. And somebody might say, oh, well, you're right back to thinking again. Well, the point is, you're not any longer at the intellectual level. In that meditation state, you are more the authentic being, you. At least here's the theory anyway, right? If when you decide to do something, if you get to point consciousness, and then you decide, all right, I want a remote view, I want to go out of body, I want to, visit somebody or do something, then, or I want to work on myself or find directions that I should go. If you jump back into the intellect with those thoughts, then you will be ineffective. You've kind of come out of your meditation state. But if you stay in that point consciousness state and operate at the being level with your mind, with your intent, see, then we focus at that level. So if the focus is at the being level, the mind, your cognitive function working at the being level, then that's a good thing. I call that focus. And you have to focus in order to make a difference. Let's say you're trying to heal someone. If you focus on that, which means you're not thinking about anything else, because you're still in that state where there's no chatter going on in your mind. There's absolutely no chatter. You're still at that point consciousness state, but now at the being level, you focus on a particular person, perhaps their illness, and then getting rid of that illness. With that focus that has nothing in it except what you're doing. There's nothing else going on inside your mind except that one thing. And you really want to do that. You have a lot of empathy for that person. You really want to help. You want to be effective. So you have a strong focus there. It's your intent is strong. That's the other half of the equation. So the first half of the equation is your meditation. Get rid of all the noise and all the chatter. The second half is you have to have an intent, not from the intellectual level, not because of ego. Oh, if I healed that person, wouldn't that be neat? I could brag about that, and I'd be a wizard, and I could do all these nifty things. If that's where that healing intent is coming from, you see, then that's out of the intellect. That's awareness in service of fear and ego and belief, instead of awareness in service to you at the being level. maybe it's a hard distinction to make, but you do need both. So you need focus if you're going to do something, if you're going to heal, if you're going to remote view, if you're going to interact with other non-physical beings and ask them, you know, how should you proceed? You know, what are the things you need to learn? And is there any way that they could help you learn? You know, if you're going to do that, you can work on your own progress if you like, or work on healing relationships in your life, you know. See yourself from another perspective. All those things can be done there, but they require you to have a being level intent. And if that intent is a strong, focused one, then you'll actually get something done. You'll maximize your ability because there's no chatter, there's no distractions, there's no ego. It's just you focused, your intent. So two different things, two different processes, both are important. Step one is just the meditation. That's where we start. That's why I mentioned that in the book, because I'm expecting that most of the people are beginners and they want to start the process. Point consciousness is a good place to go. And it, even by itself, is a neat thing. You just go there and float in the void and you come back and you feel good, you feel energized. It's a very pleasant kind of thing to do. But eventually you'd say, well, that's nice, but you know, now what? You know, I'd like to get on and do something a little more focused. And that's where this other part, but it has to be at the being level, not at the intellect. So another way to say that, it has to be in service, you know, to, well, let's put it this way. It cannot be in service to fear, ego, and belief. If it is, it's ineffective. You're going back out basically to the chatter place when you do that. So if it's not in focus, if it's not in support of fear and ego and belief, then it will be ineffective focus. It's in support, you know, of you.
Thanks, Tom. That makes
Did that
sense.
answer, Greg?
Yeah, that mostly answers it. I guess the question then I would have then is, like I said, a lot of these traditions have exercises for meditation and then you have exercises for concentration. The way that you're phrasing it, you use the meditation methods like in the book to get to this place away from ego, and then you would focus on, like you said, something like healing or remote viewing or something like that. What about, is there a possibility of just doing an exercise with focus that isn't really based on anything important, like, you know, focusing on just some mundane object just to practice and gauge your progress?
Sure, you can do that, and you can do that just with simple visuals, if you like. And sometimes I encourage people to meditate that way because it gives them, it kind of does both. A meditation that you can use that also exercises your ability to focus. Take a visual, like a soccer ball, you know, a ball that has, you know, basically with spots on it, you know, they are polygon spots, and focus on that. Have that soccer ball in air right in front of you, and then start it to spin. Start it to spin very, very slowly so that you could even count the faces as they go by. And then speed it up a little bit, then stop it, make it spin the other way, then stop it, then make it spin in an axis that's perpendicular to that. So first was top to bottom spin, then it's right to left spin. And just until you have total control, move that ball up and to the right, down and to the left, you know, make it do whatever it is you want it to do. Then split it apart into two balls. Then have one of those balls spin right to left while the other one spins top to bottom. See what I mean? This is allowing you now to use your intent to modify how the ball spins, because like you say, a trivial, you know, thing that's not significant, and then that helps you with your focus, because a ball doesn't have any ego, fear, you know, belief connection. You don't have any belief about soccer balls. You don't have any, you know, there's nothing personal in a soccer ball, so you don't connect with your fear and ego with that. It's just your intent at the being level that's doing that. And eventually you can get very good at that sort of thing. And then you can make all kinds of objects come and dance in front of you, however it is you like. Now, the people who are non-visual kind of throw up their hands and go, oh no, you know, I really don't see things, I feel things. Well, they can do the same sort of thing with the feeling. They can deal with it without the, you know, high-res pictures. And you don't really need a high-res picture either. That is a mistake that many people make. They expect the picture to be high resolution. They want to be able to see every pore on that soccer ball skin. And that's not the point. You can do that if you like. If that's something that's not hard for you to do, then fine. Go as high resolution as comes to you. And that's another thing you can do. You can go into it, go in like a zoom into that soccer ball to where you actually see the pores in the skin. You can actually go into those, get down even to the molecular level and the atomic level. Just, you know, you can go in and out. That's another thing that you can do. But many people get stuck in a trap of trying to make it higher resolution. They don't normally see things in high res. They see things that are just kind of cloudy and fuzzy. And then they say, well, I know point going on. I'm not getting a good picture. I need to keep working on this picture to get the picture better. And the harder they try, of course, the worse it is, because now they're doing from the intellect, because they think they need to do this. It's an intellectual thing. It's starting to ruin their whole, you know, their whole meditation process. Then they get frustrated with it, and you see this is going in the wrong direction. So don't worry about the detail. Just get the sense of it. And if you're really non-visual, get the feel of it, and that's good enough. You can do the same sort of things. But yeah, these kinds of exercise will focus, you know, will exercise your focus, your ability to have your intent follow your will. And the visual is just a visual representation of your intent. That's all. That's what the soccer ball is. It's just a visual representation of your intent. You can also get a feeling representation of your intent. But if you're visual and not a feeling person, then that doesn't make sense to you. Visual makes sense, and a physical, you know, a feeling representation of your intent is like, you know, what would that be like? Because you're probably not very high res on your feelings. You know, your feelings are operated at a very low res level. But people who work from a feeling level, they kind of have high res feelings, and their visuals are kind of low res and fuzzy. So there are people that work on the other way. So yes, those are kind of exercises you can do, and they will make you a lot more practiced at focus. So anything like that, you can do it with textures. It doesn't have to be just visual. You know, for people who are more kinesthetic than visual, they can do textures, or you can do smells, or you can do all sorts of things, and just change them. You know, now I'm lying on a big fur, you know, a big fur rug or something. You can feel the fur. Or you're lying on a beach and you feel the sand. You smell the salt. You know, engage all your senses if you like, and that will help you. That will help you focus your, you know, your intent in a very precise way, which is really what we're talking about. And you have to do that really with still no thoughts, you know, no chatter. It's not you've let the chatter back in. You're still in that same point consciousness, except now you're using your intent to focus on something.